An unrequited love, one that I carried through the years suddenly. My life changed the moment I met her again. She, the same girl who had once been everything to me, came back into my world, but no longer as I remembered her. Her life had fallen to pieces and she was looking for comfort, and I was the only one she turned to. But her return brought not joy, but pain and destruction. I found myself drawn into a maelstrom of emotion, despair, and guilt. Can you imagine what it's like to be responsible for someone else's life when you're barely hanging on? I sat in my small office, looking out the window at the endless rows of office buildings, trying to focus on work. Outside the window, the city was buzzing, cars honking, people rushing somewhere, but my mind was far away from here. I was remembering a past that wouldn't let me go. My name is Jake, and my story began many years ago when I was in high school. In those days, I was just a normal teenager, quiet and unnoticeable, with a lot of complexes and doubts. School seemed to me a huge labyrinth, full of mysterious corridors and unfamiliar faces. But one day, everything changed. That's where I first met her, Julia. She was the real star of our school, the girl everyone was talking about. Her beauty was stunning. Long blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and an easy smile that could melt any heart. But it wasn't just her looks. Julia had some magical power of attraction, radiated confidence and charisma, which made her the center of any company. Guys literally lined up to ask her out, but she preferred those who were older and more experienced, who could offer her something more than high school romance. And me? Well, I was just a humble boy who silently watched her from afar. Every day, I passed by her table in the cafeteria, longing to at least exchange a few words with her. But my courage left me every time I imagined approaching her. What would I say? How would she react? I was afraid she'd laugh at me or just ignore me. So I was content to stare at her from afar, making up stories about how we could be together. But then one day, a miracle happened. At one of the high school parties, with the music blaring and a crowd of teenagers dancing and laughing, I suddenly realized I was standing next to her. The music stopped, and I heard her voice addressing me. She asked if I liked the song that had just ended. My heart was pounding so loudly that I could barely breathe, but by some miracle, I managed to squeeze out an answer. We started talking, shyly at first, then more and more confidently. It turned out that we really did have a lot in common. We both loved to read books, especially fantasy and adventure. She liked to listen to music, too, and to bands I didn't even know about. We discussed plans for the summer. The hour flew by, and I realized I'd had the best night of my life. We've been friends ever since. Not the closest, of course, because she had a lot of acquaintances, but I was glad for every moment I spent with her. Even if she didn't take me seriously, even if our conversations were limited to brief chats in the corridors of the school, I was happy just to be around her. When we graduated from high school, fate had it that we both went to the same university. It seemed like a sign that our paths should continue to cross. But the reality was different. University life was radically different from school life. There was an atmosphere of freedom and independence, and everyone went his own way. Julia quickly got used to her new surroundings. She continued to lead an active social life as before. New friends, parties, clubs. Her schedule was so busy that sometimes it felt like she was living life at full speed. She easily made new acquaintances, changed boyfriends like a glove, and was always surrounded by attention. And me? I stayed in the shadows, just like before. Unlike her, I didn't seek the bright light of attention. Instead, I immersed myself in my studies, trying to excel at something specific. That said, I was always there to support her when she needed it. If she had a problem, if she needed advice or just a shoulder to lean on, I was there for her. I helped her with her studies, listened to her stories of new romances and disappointments, and pretended to be happy with my role as a friend. But that chance never came. Despite all my hopes and dreams, she never looked at me as a potential partner. To her, I was just a friend, trustworthy and loyal, but nothing more. And although I waited patiently, hoping that one day she would see something more in me, the years went by and nothing changed. After graduation, our paths finally diverged. She went to another state, got a job there, and began to build her life away from her hometown. I stayed here in my familiar surroundings, working for a local company and trying to find my place in the world. We rarely talked to each other, except for occasional emails or phone calls on holidays. But once a year, during the vacations, we met. These meetings were a real treat for me. I planned every minute in advance, anticipating how I would see her again, hear her laughter, feel her presence near me. We walked around familiar places, reminisced about old times, shared news. These moments were priceless to me because they allowed me to go back to a time when everything seemed possible. Each such date left me with hope that maybe next time something would change. Maybe she would finally notice how important I was to her, and our relationship would move to the next level. But every time we broke up, I came back to reality, realizing that nothing had changed. She would drive back, and I would be left waiting for the next time I could see her again. Almost 10 years had passed. Time passed, and our lives changed. We both grew older, facing new challenges and problems. As time went on, our communication became less and less frequent. We lived in different cities, had different jobs, and gradually our paths diverged further and further apart. She got married. The news came suddenly, like a thunderclap. I was invited to the wedding, but I couldn't bring myself to go. Imagine standing in a crowd of guests, watching her walk down the aisle, holding the hand of another man. No, I couldn't bear it. It was beyond me. I preferred to stay home so I wouldn't have to see her become someone else's wife. After that, we practically stopped talking. Our connection weakened every day until it was completely cut off. I continued to live my life trying to forget about her. Dating other girls, building a career, playing sports. On the surface, everything looked good. Work was going well, friends were supportive, life was going on as usual. At night, as the city fell asleep, I sometimes wondered how her life had turned out. What is she doing now? Is she happy? Sometimes I caught myself checking her social media pages, even though I'd promised myself long ago to stop doing that. But no matter how hard I tried, it was impossible to forget her. She was a part of my past, and she didn't seem to be going anywhere in the present. One night at a friend's party, I met a girl. Her name was Sarah. She was young, beautiful, sweet, and most importantly, simple. We started dating and soon realized that we were good together. She surrounded me with care and gave me the warmth I was missing. A year later, I proposed to her. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. The wedding was approaching, and I was full of hopes for the future. We planned a big celebration, invited friends and relatives, and prepared for a new life together. Then one day, a week before my own wedding, I happened to meet her at a local cafe. Julia. She looked completely different, tired, haggard, with dark circles under her eyes. She had lost weight, her hair had lost its luster, and there was a deep misery in her eyes. It seemed that time had not spared her, leaving traces on her face and in her soul. We talked. She told me about her problems, about how hard it was for her to go through the divorce. Her voice trembled as she recalled what she had been through. I listened to her, sympathized, tried to find the right words to support her. But deep down, I couldn't deny that I was glad she was back. Despite all the suffering she had endured, I was happy to have her around again. We met a few more times. She became closer and closer to me, sharing her thoughts and experiences. One day, she confessed that she had always known about my feelings for her, but that she couldn't reciprocate. Now she regretted the past and wanted to correct her mistakes. I felt the old wound that had never healed begin to bleed anew. Throughout the week leading up to my wedding, she kept me on my toes. Constant calls, texts, visits. She was literally stalking me. She became obsessive, demanding attention, interfering in my personal life. I tried to explain to her that I had a fiancé, that I was getting married soon, but she didn't want to hear. Her emotions were boiling, and she couldn't bear the thought of me belonging to another man. She threatened to do something terrible if I refused her. I didn't take these threats seriously, thinking it was just an emotional outburst. But every day her condition worsened. She called me at night, crying, asking to see me. I felt trapped, not knowing the right thing to do. The night before the wedding, I received the terrible news she had committed suicide. The police found her body in her apartment with a note addressed to me. In it, she wrote that she couldn't live without me, that I was the only reason for her existence. Those lines pierced through me like a sharp knife. I was shocked, crushed, unable to believe what had happened. The world around me stopped. I stood there, unable to move, realizing that I was responsible for her death. My hands were shaking, my head was spinning, and I couldn't cope with my emotions. I read and reread her letter, trying to understand how things could have gotten to this point. But there was no understanding, only emptiness and unbearable guilt. How could I have let this happen? Why couldn't I help her, couldn't keep her from taking that step? The questions swirled around in my head, but there were no answers. The wedding was canceled. My fiancée could not forgive me this tragedy. She accused me of cheating, of indifference, of lying, and we parted. I was left alone, with guilt and grief in my soul. I did not understand why she took such a step, why she put the blame on me and caused so much pain to others. My family and friends asked me questions to which I had no answers. They looked at me with bewilderment and suspicion, not understanding what role I played in this tragedy. I avoided their gazes, hid from their conversations because I didn't know what to say. How can I explain to them that I didn't mean it? How do you justify yourself when you don't understand what happened? I was free now, but that freedom was bitter. I lost the woman I loved, my fiancée, the trust of the people closest to me. My life had become a ruin, and I didn't know how to rebuild it. Now I live alone, working in the same office, looking out the window and thinking about what could have been. I will never forget Julia, but I will also never forgive myself for what happened. This story will stay with me forever, a reminder of how easy it is to lose everything that is precious.